We're here with Catherine Nester, Vice President of Physician and Patient Strategies at Inozyme. Welcome, Catherine.
Thanks for having me.
You're working in areas for which there are no current treatments. What are those areas?
So we are working right now in two rare mineralization disorders. One of those is ENPP1 deficiency, and the other one is ABCC6 deficiency. Those diseases are commonly known as GACI or PXE. Right now, there are currently no approved treatments for either of those.
So many of our listeners and viewers may not know what these two conditions are. What is ENPP1 deficiency?
So ENPP1 deficiency is a genetic disease, and there are typically two phenotypes for it. There's the GACI phenotype, and that really presents in infancy, and it's characterized by ectopic calcification and many cardiovascular issues, and it's got a very high infant mortality. For the babies that go on that survive that disease, that portion of the disease, they go on to have the other phenotype, which is ARHR2, and that's more of a skeletal phenotype.
How rare are these conditions?
These conditions are quite rare. We do think that there are probably many patients who either have an incorrect diagnosis, because remember, ENPP1 deficiency can look a lot like other forms of hypophosphatemic rickets. So we do think there's some misdiagnosis happening, or in some cases, they just never get a correct diagnosis. But they are certainly rare diseases. And the hope is with more physician education, more patient education, these folks can get a more rapid and accurate diagnosis.
So what is Inozyme doing for these patients? What are you working on?
So we are working on an enzyme replacement therapy. And so that's known as INZ-701. And that molecule is currently in studies in adult patients in both ABCC6 deficiency and ENPP1 deficiency. And so the point of those initial studies is to establish the dosing and safety of the drug. And then once we understand that better and we work with our regulatory authorities, then we will move forward into the infant and pediatric populations, particularly in the ENPP1 group, and then into a larger patient population with PXE.
And working in rare and ultra rare therapeutic areas, do you find that there's a lot of competition? Are there a lot of companies doing the kind of work that you're doing, or are you pretty much alone out there doing this work to support patients?
So these diseases currently have no approved treatments. And so Inozyme really is pioneering the efforts to find a treatment for both ENPP1 deficiency and for PXE. And, we're very grateful to the physician community that's supporting this work, to the patient community, that's really been partnering wonderfully with us to try to, get this program off the ground and in the clinic. And we are really looking forward to those results when they're ready in both groups.
Yeah, I would imagine the engagements of patients and their families is really important.
The engagement of the patient community is critical to the success that Inozyme will hopefully have with this treatment.
Tell us a bit about the trials that you have currently underway. And full disclosure, CliniLabs is involved with you in these trials. It's a privilege for us to be involved and to be working with these patients. But I'd like to hear from you how ththese trials are designed and what the goal is.
The clinical trials, as I mentioned, are underway. And so the approach that Inozyme has taken, with much feedback from regulatory authorities, is to establish the dose and safety of the drug in an adult population. And so we've designed a phase 1-2 study for both ENPP1 deficiency and ABCC6 deficiency, both of which are enrolling currently. And the first 32 days of that study is the dosing and portion of the study. And then the extension portion of the study continues on for 44 weeks. And that is where patients will continue to receive the drug, and we'll be able to follow them and really take a look at the success related to the biomarkers, to how they're feeling, to the safety. And we'll use that data to then work again with regulatory authorities to establish, the plan to go into the pediatric population.
And there is an inpatient and an outpatient component to each of these studies. How long are the patients required to be inpatient?
Yeah, so the 32 days is, of course, the initial dosing portion. It's the most intense portion of the study. And patients will have, within those 32 days, a few periods of time in which they'll stay overnight in the clinic, whichever clinic they've decided to participate at. And they'll be monitored closely by the teams that are caring for them. And, sometimes they'll have a break from doing that and they'll be able to sort of come and go. But as they decide to enter the study, the team at each of the sites will work with them on that schedule and make sure that, they understand the requirements. And, so far we've had wonderful feedback on the patient experience.
And with the experience that I've had interacting with those patients, they're so gracious, they're so agreeable, and they really are committed to the projects and interested in helping other people. We're trying to do things to make participation easier for patients by supporting travel if they're coming from outside of the local area where the clinic is, and making sure that their family members are comfortable in local hotel stays and things like that. But it really does take a committed patient to get involved.
It takes a completely committed patient and a committed family. And I will say, many of these patients are, of course, they're doing it for themselves to some degree, but they're also doing it for the rest of their community. And it's just an amazing gift that they're giving to other patients.
And for those who would like to get involved, if they know they have ENPP1 deficiency or ABCC6 deficiency, um, are there specific criteria for entry into these studies?
There are some criteria for entry into both of the studies. Each population will have to have genetically confirmed disease. So sometimes, they've been given a clinical diagnosis, so they would need to work with their healthcare provider to get their genetics done. And we can certainly support them in that effort. So genetics is one component. They'll get some screening tests ahead of time to make sure they meet the entry criteria, such as a level of PPI. So they'll have that level done. They'll get some x-rays. There are some meds that they, would not be able to be on when they're in the study. So the study teams, again, for whichever site they choose to go to, will work closely with them to make sure they understand those criteria and, get them through the screening process as safely and simply as possible.
You mentioned that patients could go to sites. Where are those sites located? I know that Clinilabs is one of them, but where are those sites located and how do patients make that first contact?
Yeah, so there's many ways that patients can make that first contact if they have interest in the study. So there are currently several sites available for each study. So for the EMPP1 study, of course, Clinilabs is one of our sites that we're so happy to have. And then we have a site in London at RPL, and Mayo Clinic also is running the EMPP1 study. And so patients really have a choice of where they would like to go to participate. For the ABCC6 study, again, Clinilabs is running that study for us. And then we also have that study at Mount Sinai in New York, and then at RPL in London.
And we know we don't have results yet to talk about, but at some point I'm going to be excited to ask you about the results of the study. And I will say for Clinilabs, it's really exciting to be involved in these projects, not only with rare and ultra rare conditions, but conditions for which there are no current treatments. To think that we may be part of bringing forward something that could be helpful to people when they don't have any other options is really exciting for us. Is there any other information that you think physicians or patients might be interested in receiving about ENPP1 ABCC6 or about the trials that you're running now?
As far as, what other information might be important for physicians and patients to know, there's hope for the future for EMPP1 deficiency and ABCC6 deficiency. The studies are open and enrolling. If you have questions about it, you can reach out to Inozyme or to one of the sites, and they're happy to help you, navigate through the process. I think patients deserve an accurate diagnosis. So for folks who haven't gotten a genetic confirmation yet, there are certainly ways to do that would be at no cost to themselves, and we're happy to help with that if needed. So I think that the bottom line here is the Inozyme team and all of the sites, including Clinilabs, are working really hard to get these treatments, through these studies, and hopefully at some point we'll have a treatment for EMPP1 and ABCC6 deficiency.
It's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. I hope to have the chance to talk with you again when the studies are completed and Inozyme is able to share results with the public. I think it'd be exciting for people to hear.
Thanks for having me.